Hi, my name is Brynn Calloway. I'm 27 years old, and this is my story. They say family is supposed to be your safe place, a fortress built of love, loyalty, and shared memories. But what happens when that fortress turns into a prison, and the people you trusted most hand you the keys to your own betrayal? Let me take you back to a time not long ago, when the people I loved the most thought they were helping someone rise, without realizing they were stepping all over me in the process. And while they poured every drop of their wealth, their attention, and their pride into my sister's shiny little dream, they never even looked up to notice the empire quietly growing beneath their feet. Mine. I was born and raised in Santa Fe, New Mexico. My parents owned a small but respected leather goods workshop. Handbags, belts, boots, that kind of thing. My father was a skilled craftsman, and my mother handled the branding and business side. I grew up watching them turn raw hides into something people proudly wore. Every time I smelled leather, it felt like home. But if you're imagining warm family dinners and joyful holiday mornings, stop, because there's something else you should know. I have a sister. Her name is Lauren. Lauren Calloway is, what's the word? Magnetic. Charming. Beautiful. She's the kind of person who enters a room and pulls every beam of light toward her, leaving the rest of us in soft, forgettable shadows. And my parents? They were absolutely enchanted by her. Always had been. She had big dreams. Fashion school in Los Angeles, then New York, then Paris. And my parents? They made sure she had every dollar, every favor, every open door she needed to chase them. While I stayed in New Mexico, working double shifts and studying supply chain logistics online, she was sipping champagne on a rooftop in Milan, tagging every photo with #hustle and #girlboss, pretending she was self-made. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you've ever felt underestimated by your own family. Don't forget to like and subscribe to follow how this quiet strength turned into something unstoppable. I never envied her. Not at first. I was too busy. I was obsessed with systems, with the gears behind the glitter. I didn't want to be the face of anything. I wanted to be the engine that made it run. At 22, I took the savings I'd built from side gigs, data entry, deliveries, inventory management, and I started building something real, quietly, methodically. I registered my first LLC, Calloway Global Logistics. I sourced materials for small brands, everything from fabric to fasteners. I learned how to optimize container loads, how to negotiate customs tariffs, how to shave dollars off shipping times without losing quality. No one knew what I was doing, especially not my parents. To them, I was the quiet one, the one who never asked for anything, and I didn't, because I never needed their approval to build something powerful. I just needed their underestimation, and oh, did they hand that to me freely. While I was expanding into international freight partnerships, Lauren's fashion brand, Calloway Luxe, was gaining traction. My parents mortgaged our family home to give her the capital for her first runway show. They sold their own workshop to invest in her vision. I watched as they emptied their accounts, not just financially, but emotionally. They placed every ounce of pride they had into Lauren's brand, a brand built entirely on ego and appearances. But here's the twist. Lauren didn't know where her fabrics came from, where her zippers were made, who handled her inventory or managed her freight. She had no idea that Calloway Luxe's most critical supplier contract belonged to me. That's right. For nearly 2 years, I had been the silent supplier for her operations, under a parent company I created through a network of shell corporations. Every bolt of fabric she ordered came from me. Every runway look she flaunted had passed through a warehouse with my initials engraved on the loading dock. But I didn't tell anyone, not yet, because vengeance, real vengeance, is not about rage. It's about patience. It's about watching them celebrate, knowing they're standing on the scaffolding you built. It's about waiting until the very moment they believe they've won, then pulling the rug out so gracefully that the fall looks like ballet. Back home, my parents had no clue what I did for a living. I told them I worked in logistics. That was enough. They were too busy flying to Lauren's showcases and posting her interviews on Facebook like she was the second coming of Coco Chanel. Sometimes I'd get texts from my mom, "Have you thought about helping Lauren with her social media?" Or, maybe you should try modeling one of her handbags, honey. Get out of your comfort zone. I'd smile and respond politely, but deep down, it stung. Not because I wanted to be like Lauren, but because they never once asked what I was building. Not once. Then came the moment that lit the fuse. Lauren announced her expansion, an entire new product line, a flagship store in Soho, a feature in Vogue business, and with it, a massive material order from her trusted supplier, which, surprise, was me. I was sitting in my office in Albuquerque when the PO came in. It was massive, her biggest order yet, and I knew exactly what to do with it. I forwarded the order to my team in New Delhi. Hold this. No processing until I say so. They responded within minutes. I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the ceiling. The storm had begun. That night, I called my parents. Hey, I said, I just wanted to say congratulations. Lauren's really doing something big. Oh, honey, yes, isn't it incredible? My mom gushed. She's turning into a global brand. And you helped her every step of the way, I said softly. Well, of course, my dad added. You invest in the child with the brightest future. That's just common sense. I ended the call with a smile on my lips and a fire in my chest, because they had no idea that the fate of their Golden Girls empire rested in the hands of the daughter they never really saw. And that was just the beginning. The next few days were a strange blur of stillness and fire. I woke up each morning knowing that a clock had started ticking, but Lauren didn't hear it. My phone buzzed constantly with emails from her team, following up on the order status. At first, my fulfillment office responded with polite delays. Shipment review in progress. Materials held at customs. Awaiting internal clearance. All technically true, none of them permanent solutions. But they were enough to make her nervous. I wasn't doing this for some cartoonish sense of revenge. I didn't want to ruin her for the sake of it. I just needed her, and our parents, to see the truth, to see me, not the version they created in their minds, the one that never caused trouble, never needed help, never stood out, but the version who built something massive while they were busy applauding her high heels and hashtags. Lauren called me on a Thursday. She sounded breathless, anxious, like someone trying to smile while holding a house of cards. Brynn, hey, you have a second? Sure, I said, keeping my voice neutral. What's going on? Okay, so this is kind of random, she laughed nervously. But do you know anyone who works in textile distribution? Like, for international brands? I bit the inside of my cheek. She was fishing. She didn't know it was me. Not yet. But something inside her had started to hum with suspicion. I mean, depends on the region, I replied casually. Why? Well, our supplier's been kind of hard to reach. And there's this huge event coming up and, never mind. It's probably just a shipping delay. Yeah, I said. That happens sometimes. Silence on her end. Then, with that same fake laugh she'd mastered in fashion school, she said, Anyway, just thought I'd ask. You're always good with businessy stuff. Businessy stuff. God. Our parents still had no idea. My dad had just wired her another $10,000 to support the rebranding. My mom had taken out a personal loan to help pay for her PR team. They were all in, and every dollar they dropped just made me more certain that the final reveal had to be flawless. But revenge, real revenge, isn't just about pulling strings. It's about control, timing, and I needed both. I started planting seeds, a carefully crafted whisper campaign, using burner email accounts and industry gossip forums. Has anyone heard of Calloway Luxe's recent supplier issues? Seems like their latest drop is delayed. Word is there's trouble overseas. The fashion world runs on perception. A small ripple can become a tidal wave in a matter of days. By the end of the week, Lauren's phone was glued to her hand. Her Instagram posts got shorter, less confident. The sparkle in her captions dimmed. And then came the first crack. She showed up at my apartment. That had never happened before. I lived in a modest one-bedroom in downtown Santa Fe. Nothing flashy, but clean, professional, with touches of comfort I'd allowed myself after years of frugality. She stood at my door wearing sunglasses too big for her face and a blazer that probably cost more than my rent. Brynn, she said, removing her glasses. Her eyes looked tired. I need to talk. I stepped aside and let her in. She wandered around my living room like a tourist, running her fingers over my bookshelves and pausing at the framed quote on my wall, "Power is quiet." Finally, she turned to me. "This supplier issue is killing me, and I know you're not in fashion, but you know business. You're smart. Always have been. I'm desperate." Something in me softened. Just a little. Because for the first time in years, she was admitting I had value. "What do you want to know?" I asked. "Anything," she whispered. "I just want to fix this." I leaned forward. "What if I told you? You've been buying from me." She blinked. "What?" "I own the supplier chain. The fabrics, the hardware, the shipping lanes. All of it. Through a holding group. You've been one of my biggest clients for 2 years." The silence was so heavy, it almost cracked the ceiling. She laughed at first. A short, brittle sound. "No, seriously. What? I'm not joking. What? Brynn, that's insane. You don't even, how would you? I built it from scratch. While you were chasing magazine spreads, I built a network. Quietly, efficiently. And yes, you've been buying from me this whole time." She sat down. Hard. Her face was pale. "You're serious. Dead serious." Then her voice turned bitter. "So this is what? A game? You're trying to humiliate me?" I crossed my arms. "I'm trying to make you understand. You've taken and taken from everyone, including our parents, without once asking who was really behind the machine that made your world work. They gave me that money because they believe in me. They gave you that money because they don't see anyone else. Not even their other daughter, who's been building an empire under their noses." Her eyes glistened. "So what now? You cut me off? Ruin me? Is that what you want?" I paused. The anger in me was real, but so was the sadness, the grief of being unseen for so long. "No," I said. "I'm not cutting you off. I'm offering you a deal." She blinked. "A deal? You want your materials on time? You want to keep your brand alive? Then we go public with the truth. You make a statement about collaboration, about the importance of your behind-the-scenes team. You name your logistics partner as part of your success. Me. And you make it loud." Her lips parted. "You want credit? I want acknowledgement and a stake in your company. You're blackmailing me. I'm being honest. For the first time in years, you can say no, and I'll cancel your next 5 shipments. Let's see how your investors feel about that." She sat there for a long time, staring out the window at the dusty horizon of Santa Fe. Finally, she nodded. Okay, I'll do it. You want public recognition? Fine. You want part of the company? Fine. But this changes everything." "Yes," I said quietly. "It does." The next week, she posted a long caption on her brand's page. It was polished, professional, and strategically vague, but it did the job. Behind every successful brand is an engine of brilliant, quiet minds. I'm proud to share that I've partnered officially with one of the most effective supply chain leaders in the country, someone whose influence has shaped Callaway Luxe from the start. Welcome to the team, Brynn Calloway. The likes came in fast. Comments praising the sisterhood, the female empowerment, the smart business pivot. None of them knew the truth, but I didn't care. I was no longer invisible. And then finally, my parents called. "Brynn," my father said slowly. "Why didn't you ever tell us what you were doing?" "Because you never asked." He sighed. "We're proud of you. You know that, right?" For the first time in a decade, I didn't respond with a polite smile or a soft murmur. I just said, "I know. Now." It wasn't a complete healing, not yet, but it was a start. And I knew that this was just the beginning of the real power shift. Power changes people. That's what I learned in the months that followed. Not always in the way you'd expect. Sometimes it doesn't corrupt, but reveals. And sometimes, when you've been invisible for long enough, the sudden light feels almost unnatural, like your skin isn't ready for it. But I was ready. I'd been ready my whole life. After the public partnership announcement, things moved fast. Too fast. Investors were suddenly interested in the mysterious logistics partner behind Callaway Luxe's smooth expansion. Magazine editors wanted interviews with the quiet genius who had helped scale the business. I declined most of them. I wasn't chasing headlines. I wanted influence, not attention. But Lauren? She started spinning a different story. At first, it was subtle. She'd mention our partnership in interviews but soften the language. Brynn's been so helpful these past few months. Or, it's amazing to have my sister finally involved in the business. Finally. As if I hadn't been there all along, pulling levers from behind the curtain. The worst part? People believed her. I tried to stay focused on what mattered. Infrastructure, numbers, scaling new routes. I negotiated better freight rates from Asia, built an inventory alert system for her stock managers. I brought real systems into a brand that had been built on gloss and guesswork. And yet, she kept talking like I was just an assistant who got promoted because of a last name. My resentment started to return, not as fire, but as ice. Cold, quiet, dangerous. It came to a head at the New York showroom launch. This was her biggest event yet. Fashion editors from 3 countries, buyers from 2 major department stores, and a press crew from a streaming documentary series. She invited me, of course, but as a guest, not a partner. No speech time, no mentions in the printed materials, no signage. I wore a black silk blouse and tailored pants, minimal, professional, unmissable in its simplicity. The showroom was stunning, I'll give her that. A converted loft in Soho, all white brick and cascading natural light. Racks of her new line stood like sentinels under spotlights. Guests floated through with champagne flutes, whispering about textures, color palettes, market potential. Lauren floated too, all polished grace and designer heels. She kissed cheeks, posed for photos, made promises she couldn't possibly keep. And when the time came for her big speech, she stood on the small stage near the back wall, a golden spotlight spilling over her like it was pulled from heaven itself. I couldn't have done this alone, she began, her voice soft and rehearsed. It takes a team, and I'm so grateful for my creative team, my interns, my family, especially my parents, who've supported me since day one. She smiled toward the crowd. People clapped. I also want to thank my sister, she added. Brynn's here tonight. She's recently joined the Calloway Luxe journey, and it's been wonderful to have her as part of the family effort. Recently joined. I felt something inside me crack, a fine, invisible fracture running straight through my chest. Not because I needed praise, but because she had twisted the truth. Again, diminished my role. Again. After the speech, I walked outside. The streets of Soho were still busy, even at night. The air buzzed with voices and honking cars and distant music. I stood on the sidewalk and stared up at the building, the golden logo on the second-floor window, Calloway Luxe. She had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I sent an internal memo to my holding company. The terms of the supplier agreement with Calloway Luxe would be changing. Effective immediately, prices would rise by 17%. New orders would require 50% payment up front. Failure to meet these terms would result in delayed processing or cancellation. Legally, I was covered. All previous contracts had been under limited-time rates, all with clear expiration dates. The new terms reflected market shifts and increased demand. But emotionally, this was me reclaiming control. Lauren called me within 2 hours. What the hell is this? It's business, I said. You're raising rates? You're charging me up front now? I'm charging the brand up front, not you. You wanted to treat me like an employee, Lauren. Now I'm a vendor. You can take it or leave it. You're sabotaging me. No, I said, calm as a still lake. I'm showing you what happens when you lie, when you rewrite history to suit your ego. She was quiet for a moment. Then her voice dropped. You're going to destroy everything we built. I didn't flinch. You built an image. I built the foundation. One can survive without the other. Guess which one? That night, she posted a story on social media. A black background, white text. Sometimes the hardest battles are with the people closest to you. Her followers ate it up. Sympathy poured in. Messages of strength, betrayal, empowerment. She never mentioned me by name. She didn't have to, but I wasn't playing games anymore. The next week, I launched a quiet campaign. Not public, not flashy. Just a series of strategic meetings. I approached 3 mid-tier fashion brands who had expressed frustration with their current suppliers. I offered them rates 10% below market average, faster fulfillment, and personal oversight from me. They signed within days. All of them brands competing in the same market space as Lauren. When she found out, she called me again. This time she didn't yell. She didn't even argue. "You're really doing this?" "Yes," I said. "Why?" "Because I'm done being the shadow behind your spotlight. I gave you a chance to acknowledge the truth. You chose to rewrite it." She exhaled. "So that's it? That's justice." Our parents tried to intervene. My mother sent long emails. My father left voicemails filled with disappointment. "This isn't what family does," he said in one. "This isn't who you are." But they didn't know who I was. Not really. They had only ever seen the quiet girl in the corner, never the strategist behind the curtain. Lauren began to struggle. Slowly, publicly. Deliveries missed deadlines. Production costs rose. Her new line was delayed twice. Retailers pulled out. She blamed logistics issues, of course, but insiders knew. Whispers spread. People started asking questions she couldn't answer. Meanwhile, my 3 new partners flourished. My brand, Calloway Supply International, was gaining recognition. Quietly, of course. Just how I liked it. But make no mistake, people were watching. Respect was blooming. And with it came something I hadn't expected. Validation. Not the loud, performative kind. Not the applause at launch parties. But quiet nods in boardrooms. Trusted referrals. Deals closed not because of charm, but because of competence. And still, Lauren refused to admit it. She clung to her image like it was armor. She kept posting, kept smiling, but the cracks were widening, and everyone could see them now. That was the moment I realized something. This story was never about proving her wrong. It was about proving myself right. I wasn't the lesser daughter. I wasn't the forgotten Calloway. I was the architect, the one who saw the gaps, the one who filled them, the one who built something real. And I was just getting started. It's strange how silence can feel louder than noise. After months of tension, arguments, and strategic retaliation, everything seemed to settle. The phone calls stopped. The emails slowed. My parents gave up trying to fix the situation, and Lauren, she went quiet. Not completely, of course. She was still active online, still pretending everything was under control, but I could tell something had shifted. The sparkle in her voice was gone, the confidence in her eyes, muted. And me? I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't throwing victory parties or boasting about revenge. I was working, growing, becoming. The 3 brands I had partnered with were thriving, not because I was some miracle worker, but because I listened. I studied their needs. I anticipated problems before they became disasters. For the first time in my life, people were coming to me for advice, for direction, for clarity. I wasn't someone's little sister anymore. I was the cornerstone of something powerful. But here's the thing about building power. It doesn't erase pain. I still felt it. Late at night, when the emails were done and the reports were filed, I'd sit by my apartment window and feel this strange hollowness, like I'd won a game I never asked to play. I didn't want Lauren to fail. I didn't want my parents to regret anything. I just wanted to matter. One evening, as summer slipped into fall, I got a letter. A real one, not an email, handwritten. I almost didn't open it when I saw the return address, my parents' house. But curiosity won. It was from my dad, short, careful. "Brynn, I don't know how to start this. We've watched everything unfold and we realize now how blind we were. Your mother and I, we thought we were supporting a dream, but we didn't see the one right in front of us. We're sorry, not just for what we did, but for what we didn't do. We see you now. Love, Dad." I stared at that letter for a long time. My fingers trembled. Not because I was angry, because I wasn't anymore. That letter cracked something open in me. The armor I had wrapped so tightly around myself for years. It didn't feel necessary anymore. A few days later, I visited them. No announcement. I just showed up at the house in Santa Fe where I grew up. The leather workshop was gone, sold off years ago, but the house still smelled like the past. Coffee and cedar. My mom opened the door. Her eyes widened. She didn't say a word. She just stepped aside and let me in. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Lauren used to steal the last cookie and I'd be blamed for it. The same table where I'd do homework while they praised her art shows and fashion boards. It felt smaller now. Or maybe I had just grown. I read the letter, I said. My dad nodded. We meant every word. I know. My mom reached for my hand. Her fingers were colder than I remembered. You've built something incredible, Brynn, and we're so proud. I'm sorry it took us so long to say that out loud. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just held her hand and let the silence speak for both of us. Sometimes love doesn't come in the form of big gestures. Sometimes it's just being seen, finally, truly seen. But forgiving them didn't mean forgetting everything. It didn't mean letting go of what I had worked for. And it certainly didn't mean letting Lauren off the hook. She had gone nearly 2 months without speaking to me. But one evening, I got a text. Need to talk. Please. I ignored it. 2 days later. Brynn, I'm sorry. Can we meet? I agreed. Not out of kindness. Out of curiosity. We met at a cafe in downtown Albuquerque. Neutral ground. She looked different. Less polished. Her hair wasn't professionally styled. Her makeup was lighter. And her eyes? They were tired. Thanks for coming, she said. I nodded. Talk. I messed up. Yes, I replied. She swallowed. I let my ego get in the way. I thought if I admitted how much you'd done, I'd disappear, that people would stop seeing me as the one who built the brand. I didn't respond. But the truth is, I didn't build it alone. I never did. You carried more than I ever gave you credit for. And when I finally acknowledged that, I felt small. I tilted my head. Is that why you lied? She winced. I didn't think it was a lie at first. I thought it was strategy. Keep the spotlight on the face of the brand. But I see now how selfish that was. What do you want, Lauren? She exhaled. A real partnership. Not just on paper. For real. I want to fix what I broke. I looked at her for a long time. The girl who had stolen the spotlight, taken everything our parents had, and ignored the hands holding her up. But she wasn't that girl anymore. Or at least, not completely. I'll think about it, I said. But if this is going to work, the narrative changes. The story changes. You don't get to be the solo genius anymore. She nodded. Agreed. And something inside me shifted again. Not trust. Not yet. But space. Space to rebuild. Not because she deserved it, but because I did. I deserved peace. I deserved clarity. From that point on, things changed. Slowly, intentionally. Lauren and I drafted new agreements. We restructured the brand. I became COO, with full control over operations, fulfillment, and supply partnerships. Her face stayed on the brand, but the engine? That was mine. And this time, people knew it. Articles started to include both our names. The Calloway sisters. Brains, beauty, and business. It was a little cheesy, but I let it slide. Investors took us more seriously. Retailers had more confidence. And the public? They loved the story of reconciliation. 2 sisters. Once divided, now stronger than ever. But I never forgot. And I never let my guard down completely. Because growth isn't always about healing relationships. Sometimes it's about defining boundaries. Clear ones. With family. With work. With yourself. I still kept my separate company. Calloway Supply International remained independent, thriving, untouchable. That was my sanctuary. My proof. Lauren stayed in her lane, for the most part. And when she didn't, I reminded her, firmly, professionally, that we were not going back to how things used to be. My parents came to visit my office one day. My mom wore a proud smile the whole time. My dad looked around and said, "You built all this?" "Yes," I said, "every inch." And they beamed. Not because they were proud of the business, but because they finally saw me. At night, I'd look out my apartment window, the city glowing in soft yellow and blue, and I'd think about everything it took to get here. The betrayal, the silence, the fire, the growth, and I realized something else. This story wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about becoming. Everything was going well. Too well, if I'm being honest. It was like walking across a frozen lake with the sun shining and no cracks beneath your feet, but knowing that somewhere, deep below, the ice wasn't as solid as it seemed. I had rebuilt the foundation, re-established myself as a partner, not an accessory. I was finally in control. But control is fragile, especially when history hasn't been fully healed, just rearranged. Lauren and I had been working together for nearly 8 months under the new agreement. She handled the public side, the creative vision, and influencer partnerships. I ran everything else: inventory management, supplier negotiations, logistics. Our workflow was efficient, even impressive. Orders were being fulfilled faster, costs were reduced, and we had just signed with a major retail chain in Austin that would feature Callaway Luxe in a limited collection series. But underneath the smiles and meetings and joint statements, I felt it, that old current. Lauren's need for attention, her obsession with being adored. I could see it in how she handled the media, the little exaggerations that crept back into her interviews. I could see it in her eyes when someone praised my contributions in front of her. She would nod politely, but the tightness in her jaw betrayed her. Then came the Fashion Tech Conference in Dallas. We were invited to speak together on a panel titled, Sisters in Business, the Dual Power of Vision and Operations. It was supposed to be a celebration of everything we had accomplished, a public acknowledgement that we were equals. I prepped the talking points, kept the narrative balanced. I didn't want to dominate, just contribute. But when we got on that stage, and the questions began, Lauren took control. It started small. She talked over me a few times. Nothing major, just slipped in answers before I could open my mouth. I let it go. But then came the question that changed everything. A journalist in the audience asked, "You've mentioned that Brynn plays a critical role in operations. Could you elaborate on what that partnership looks like behind the scenes?" It was a perfect opportunity for her to affirm our equal standing, to say what she'd said in private, to honor the truth, but she smiled and said, "Of course. Well, Brynn's been learning so much this past year. It's been amazing watching her grow into a leadership role." I blinked. Learning? Grow into? She wasn't just shading me. She was rewriting the script again, on stage, in public, with cameras rolling. I clenched my jaw and let her finish. I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. But I looked straight into the eyes of the moderator and said, "That's one way to put it. I actually oversee all supplier contracts and logistics systems. Our last 3 brand expansions, including this retail launch, were implemented under a framework I designed from scratch. So yes, I'm learning, but I'm also leading." There was a pause. The audience laughed politely, but Lauren didn't. Her face stiffened for just a second. And in that second, I saw it clearly. She hadn't changed. Not really. She was still the girl who needed the applause more than the truth. After the panel, she cornered me in the hotel hallway. "What was that?" she hissed. "I could ask you the same thing." "You embarrassed me." "No, Lauren. I corrected you. There's a difference." She crossed her arms. "You made it sound like I'm incompetent." "I didn't need to. Your insecurity did that on its own." Her lips trembled. "I thought we were past this." I shook my head. "You want the benefits of partnership without doing the work of respect." She turned and walked away. I flew home that night, my mind spinning the entire flight. My heart was tired, not broken, not bruised, just tired of waiting for people to become who they promised to be. I realized something important in that moment. No matter how much someone says they've changed, some parts of them will always circle back to their original shape. The next week, I made my decision. I scheduled a board meeting with our internal team. Lauren wasn't invited. This wasn't revenge. It was reality. I laid out a new proposal, split the company. Callaway Luxe would remain hers. The brand, the face, the PR storm. But all logistics, fulfillment, supply contracts, warehousing, and back-end systems would be absorbed under my independent umbrella. I would no longer report to her. She would pay for services rendered, and I would set the terms. It wasn't personal. It was business. The board hesitated at first, unsure of the optics. But when I presented the numbers, the difference was clear. Callaway Luxe was running smoother, faster, and more profitably under my systems than it had in years. The separation was clean, beneficial, strategic. And then I told Lauren. She came to my office furious. "You're cutting me out? I'm protecting what I built. You can't just—" "Yes, I can. You signed the partnership agreement. You knew this was always an option. You're ungrateful." I laughed. Not bitterly, Just tired. Ungrateful? You think I should thank you for using me like a backstage pass to credibility? She looked like she might cry, but she didn't, and neither did I. This will ruin us, she said softly. No, I replied. This will finally free us. The split was announced a week later. I released a carefully worded statement. She released one too. Her version spun the story as a strategic brand shift to empower both sisters in their individual visions. She never mentioned the argument, never admitted anything, but the media didn't buy it. The real story started to leak through. Journalists began connecting the dots. Articles emerged about the behind-the-scenes operations that had been the real backbone of Calloway Luxe. They called me for interviews. At first, I declined. But then, I said yes. I didn't drag her name through the mud. I didn't exaggerate. I just told the truth, calmly, clearly. And when people heard the real version, how I built the supply chain, the contracts, the international network, they finally understood. The praise didn't come in fireworks. It came in emails from industry veterans, in job offers, in podcast invitations, in speaking gigs. It came in the form of respect. And that night, when I stood on the stage at a private conference in Seattle, delivering a keynote to a room full of CEOs, I paused and looked out at the crowd. I thought of the girl who had once sat quietly at her family's kitchen table, invisible while her sister got all the glory. And I thought of the woman I had become. This isn't a story about family rivalry, I said, voice steady. It's a story about value, about learning that you don't have to scream to be powerful. You just have to be undeniable. The room erupted in applause. I stepped off the stage with my heart calm, because I knew this was the climax of a story not about revenge, but about restoration. But one thing remained, one final moment that would bring the story full circle. It was early spring in Santa Fe when I walked back into my parents' house. The same warm breeze rolled through the trees. The air smelled like wood smoke and sunlight, and I could hear the faint sounds of birds nesting on the rooftop. Everything looked exactly the same, yet nothing was as it once had been. I had changed. The world around me had shifted, and now I was here to bring it all full circle. My parents sat at the kitchen table, cups of coffee between them. My mother looked up first. Her eyes softened when she saw me, and without a word she rose and opened her arms. I hesitated, then stepped into the embrace. It was warm, real. She didn't say sorry again. She didn't need to. My father leaned back in his chair, watching us with that familiar, quiet gaze. "You've been in the papers," he said with a small smile. "I know," I replied, taking a seat. "Not exactly what I imagined growing up." "No," he said, "but better, more honest." We talked for a while, about work, about the business, about what was next. They didn't ask for details. They didn't try to give advice. They listened. And for the first time in my life, I felt like we were speaking the same language. I told them about the split from Lauren, about how things had unraveled again, but this time, on my terms. My mother sighed, not in disappointment, but in understanding. "You tried," she said. "You really tried." "I did," I whispered. "But some people can't share the light." My dad nodded slowly. "And you don't need to. You've got your own." That moment lingered in my chest long after I left. It didn't erase the years of feeling like I wasn't enough, but it softened the edges. It reminded me that even broken things could be mended, if not returned to their original shape, then at least into something new, something better. A week later, I got an email from Lauren. Subject, final thoughts. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Her message was short, surprisingly simple. "Brynn, I've decided to step back from the brand. I'm going to take some time off, maybe travel, maybe figure out who I am without all the noise. I know we'll never see this story the same way, but I hope one day you'll believe that I loved you in my own way. I'm sorry for the parts I broke. I'm proud of what you've built." Lauren, I didn't reply. Not because I hated her. I didn't. Not anymore. But because some messages aren't meant to be answered. Some are meant to be felt, absorbed, and left exactly where they landed. Instead, I printed the email. I folded it and placed it in the back of my desk drawer, next to the letter my father had written me. Not out of sentimentality, but out of reverence. For the version of me who had waited so long for those words, and for the version of me who no longer needed them to move forward. Business boomed after the split. Without the tension of Lauren's ego or the dance of public relations, I was free to lead the way I'd always wanted, strategically, quietly, with excellence at the center of every decision. My client list doubled in 6 months. I opened a second warehouse in Nevada. And in one particularly surreal moment, I was asked to advise a tech startup on optimizing global fulfillment flows. Me, the invisible sister, now a voice that others paid to hear. But beyond the numbers and expansion, something else grew, something deeper. I started mentoring, quietly, just a few young women from New Mexico who reminded me of myself. Sharp minds, big ideas, no spotlight. Girls who didn't come from wealth or connections, but who understood systems, who saw the gears moving behind the curtain. I taught them how to build, not for approval, not for applause, but for impact. One of them asked me, during a late-night workshop, "Do you ever regret it? The fight with your sister? The way things went down?" I paused, looking out the window at the desert skyline. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not because I wish it hadn't happened, but because I wish it hadn't been necessary." She nodded like she understood more than her 17 years should allow. "You think she'll ever come back?" "I don't know," I said. "But if she does, I hope it's not to reclaim anything. I hope it's to start fresh." I didn't hear from Lauren for a long time after that. She stopped posting on social media. Her name slowly faded from the fashion headlines. People moved on, and so did I. One morning, almost a year after the conference in Dallas, I woke up to an article in a major business magazine. It was titled, "The Rise of Silent Builders: How Women Like Brynn Calloway Are Redefining Leadership." There it was. My name, on the cover. No sister attached. No brand masking the work. Just me. I read the article 3 times. Not because I was shocked, but because I wanted to feel it. Really feel it. That moment of recognition I had once begged for in silence. It wasn't about fame. It was about finally being placed in the story where I belonged. Later that day, I went back to the leather shop, or rather, what had become of it. A local artisan had reopened the space and turned it into a cooperative workshop for women in trades. I walked through the space slowly, the scent of fresh leather stirring something deep in my chest. The owner recognized me. "You're Brynn Calloway, right?" I nodded. "My daughter's learning how to hand tool belts here. She wants to be like you." I smiled. "Tell her she already is." That night, I sat on my balcony, looking up at the stars above Santa Fe. The sky was endless, open. I thought about everything it took to get here. The betrayal, the silence, the fury, the growth. And I realized something that made my chest rise with peace. I never needed revenge. I needed power. Not power over people, power over my own story. And now, I had it. Not because I took it, because I built it. Brick by brick, word by word, moment by moment. And no one, not even my sister, could ever take that away. A year passed, then another. The seasons changed like they always had, painting the skies over Santa Fe in copper and gold, then washing them clean in spring rain. Life didn't slow down, but it settled into something softer, something more mine. My days were full, my decisions steady, and my silence, finally, peaceful. I had everything I once thought was out of reach. Not just success, not just autonomy, but clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you stop begging for recognition and start living as if you've always deserved it. Because the truth is, I had. I just didn't know how to believe it back then. My company, Callaway Supply International, had expanded beyond anything I could have imagined. We now managed distribution for brands in 5 countries. We were discreet, efficient, and deeply respected in the industry. People came to us not because we were loud, but because we delivered, every time, without fail. I had built a reputation for excellence that no press release could fabricate and no relative could shadow. And yet, it was never about the empire. It was about the quiet. It was about walking into a room and not needing to prove myself to anyone anymore. About hearing someone say my name, not as an afterthought, not as someone's sister, but as the woman who changed the entire trajectory of their operations with a single consultation. It was about being whole, alone. But that doesn't mean I was lonely. The mentors I had once guided had grown into leaders themselves. I watched as one of them, a brilliant logistics mind named Tessa, launched her own boutique fulfillment agency in Texas. Another, Mia, was now a speaker for women in STEM, advocating for young girls with strategic minds in overlooked communities. I wasn't just building systems, I was building legacies, and it felt like redemption. Sometimes I'd go weeks without thinking about Lauren. Other times, it would hit me in the smallest moments. A commercial that used a song we danced to as kids, or a new fashion line that reminded me of the sketches she used to doodle on napkins at dinner. There were moments I missed her. Not the business partner, not the Instagram version, just her. The girl who used to make me laugh until I cried. The sister who once swore we'd never grow apart, no matter where life took us. I didn't hear from her for a long time. But one evening, just as the sky turned lavender behind the hills, I got a postcard. No envelope, just a simple card with a photo of a rocky cliff overlooking the Amalfi Coast. On the back, in handwriting that hadn't changed since we were teenagers. Still figuring it out, still trying. Thought of you today. Hope you're happy. L. I turned it over in my hands a dozen times. The front image was sunlit and open, almost dreamlike. The kind of place you go when you need to break away from everything you've ever known. A place to start again. I didn't write back. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. But because some bridges don't need rebuilding. They just need to rest in peace. And sometimes love looks like letting someone go. Not out of bitterness. But because the road between you is better walked separately. Instead, I tucked the postcard into my bookshelf, right between two of my favorite leadership books, where no one else would see it. A quiet marker of something that mattered once, even if it wasn't meant to last. 1 year later, I stood on the stage of a leadership summit in Washington, D.C. I was the closing speaker, the final voice in a weekend packed with CEOs, entrepreneurs, and innovators from all over the country. As I looked out at the room, I saw reflections of who I used to be. Ambitious women in the back rows taking notes furiously, quiet ones by the wall who had great minds, but no one yet to believe in them. And I told them my story, not just the polished version. I told them about the betrayal, about the silence, about what it feels like to be passed over by the people who are supposed to love you most. I told them how easy it is to turn that pain inward and believe it defines your worth. And then I told them the truth. You don't need to become louder to matter more. You don't need to shrink to keep others comfortable. You are not the story someone else wrote about you. You get to write your own. When the room stood up in applause, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt grounded, finally, like I had stepped fully into the woman I was always meant to be. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I took off my heels and poured a glass of water. I sat by the window and looked out over the city lights, glowing like a grid of possibilities, and I thought about how many versions of myself had lived in the last few years. The daughter, the shadow, the engine, the voice, the woman. A knock at the door startled me. When I opened it, no one was there, just a small white envelope on the floor, with my name handwritten on the front. Inside, a single note. You changed my life, Brynn. Thank you for showing me how to fight the right way, with grace, with power, and in your own name. It wasn't signed, but I knew who it was from. Not Lauren, not my parents, but one of the young women I'd mentored years before. Maybe Tessa, maybe Mia. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the ripple had reached someone. That's the thing about stories like mine. They don't end with fireworks or revenge or dramatic closure. They end in echo, in the way your name is spoken by someone you never met, because your story helped them write theirs. In the way your silence turns into strength. In the way a broken beginning finds its peace. Not because you got everything you wanted, but because you finally saw yourself clearly. The girl who once sat in a corner and watched her sister shine, she became the woman who built her own world from the shadows. And in doing so, she found something greater than revenge. She found herself, completely, unapologetically, and forever. My name is Brynn Calloway, and that was my story. Have you ever felt overlooked by the people who were supposed to believe in you the most? Share your story in the comments. If Brynn's journey spoke to something in your own heart, please like and subscribe for more stories of quiet strength, personal growth, and powerful redemption. Send this to someone who's building their own path in silence. Remember, the most transformative victories often begin the moment you decide to stop waiting for permission and start owning your story. Thank you for watching, and never forget, you are enough even when no one is clapping.